That smoke on the horizon is not an accident. It's not an industrial fire. It's a large Kuwaiti oil tanker called Al Salmi being hit and set on fire by an Iranian drone while anchored in the waters of Dubai. Look at that hole in the hull. This ship wasn't trying to force its way through any war zone. It was stationary, anchored, safe, or at least it thought it was. And it was attacked anyway. But the story of Al Salmi isn't just about an attacked ship. It's about something much bigger. It's about an entire world that, without realizing it, put all its survival in the hands of a single waterway. 34 kilometers. And when that corridor was blocked, the world discovered just how fragile it was. Because this is the new reality of the Strait of Hormuz. This strip of sea is only 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. 20% of all the planet's oil passes through it. Control of this corridor means control of global energy, and currently Iran holds that control. Your ship's location doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you're carrying. If Iran decides you can't pass, well, you can't pass. And if you try, Al Salmi shows what happens. But what almost no one is saying yet is that, by doing this, Iran may have made the biggest mistake in its history. Because this move, which seems like the peak of Iranian power, is actually accelerating exactly what the country feared the most. Look, before the war, about 110 ships crossed the Strait of Hormuz every day. Today, it's dropped to fewer than 10. Almost 2,000 ships are stuck, waiting on both sides of this waterway, which suddenly turned into a war zone. The price of oil has surpassed $126 per barrel. Countries on the other side of the planet are rationing fuel. The Philippines have declared a national energy emergency. Pakistan got so desperate that it negotiated with Iran for the right to pass ships through the strait and celebrated as if it had won a war. It seems like a total victory for Iran. It seems like the moment when decades of threats finally turned into real power. But there is an unwritten rule that repeats itself throughout history. The rule that when a country uses its greatest weapon, it reveals exactly where it is vulnerable. And Iran just showed the world the exact roadmap for how to make it irrelevant. Most people still haven't noticed this detail. Iran didn't close the strait. He turned the strait into a business. Near Larak Island, within Iranian waters, the Revolutionary Guard created a special transit corridor. Ships that want to cross need to hand over the full cargo list, the name of every crew member, and the final destination to representatives authorized by the Iranian military. They receive a clearance code. They are escorted by a military vessel, and some pay for the crossing. The reported amount is $2 million per crossing, paid in yuan, the Chinese currency. Because Iran can't use dollars. International sanctions prevent it. The Iranian parliament is now debating a law to make this toll permanent and official. A parliament member stated openly, "We guarantee the strait's security." So it's natural that ships should pay for that. I don't know if you noticed what's happening here, but what Iran is doing has a name. It's called extortion. It's demanding money by force, using threats as leverage. It's banned by the law of the sea. But Iran is doing it anyway. And many countries are paying. This is an interesting historical parallel. In the 2000s, Blockbuster charged such outrageous late fees that their own customers started looking for alternatives. That's exactly what paved the way for Netflix. The act of monetizing dependence was what destroyed the monopoly. Iran is doing the same thing with the Strait of Hormuz. The question that remains is simple. Is there a way out that doesn't depend on negotiating with Iran? Is there a way to make this toll completely useless? The answer is yes, and it's being built right now. When you look at a map of the region, something immediately catches your attention. The Musandam Peninsula at the northern tip of Oman juts out toward the Strait of Hormuz like a knife pointing north. And between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, at that point, there is only a strip of land a few dozen kilometers wide. The idea that started circulating on social media is simple. Drill through that strip of land. Dig a canal. The ships go from the Persian Gulf straight to the Gulf of Oman without passing through the strait, without passing through Iranian waters, without paying tolls to anyone. The idea became so popular that a former Speaker of the United States House of Representatives even shared a proposal to dig this canal using nuclear bombs. The proposal was a joke, but he didn't realize it and reposted it as if it were serious. The problem is that the Musandam Canal, which looks beautiful on the map, is a nightmare in practice. Those mountains you see there are the Hajar Mountains. They reach up to 3,000 meters in altitude. The rock is one of the hardest types of stone in the world, formed over millions of years of pressure inside the earth. For a large tanker to pass, the canal would need to be at least 25 meters deep and 200 meters wide. Hundreds of locks would be needed, giant structures that work like gates to control the water level, similar to those in the Panama Canal. And the cost could reach $300 billion. $300 billion. That's the equivalent of building almost 60 Panama Canals. That's more money than many countries generate in an entire year. The project cost is absurd, but as we'll see, there's a much bigger problem than just the price. Money isn't the main issue. It's something else. The Strait of Hormuz is 34 kilometers wide. A canal would be maybe 200 meters wide. The narrower the corridor, the easier it is to block. In 2021, a single ship ran aground in the Suez Canal and paralyzed global trade for 6 days. A canal through Musandam would be the perfect target for any attack, from a missile, a drone, or a single poorly positioned ship. So the massive canal through Musandam is the most dramatic solution. But it's far from being the most urgent. While the world debates this decades-long project, another race has already begun. Faster, more practical, and already producing results. The Gulf countries aren't waiting. Few realize they began building the way out decades ago. Silently, without headlines, without the world paying attention. Saudi Arabia has a pipeline called Petroline. A pipeline is a giant tube buried underground that transports oil over long distances, like a vein beneath the earth. This one is 1,200 kilometers long. It starts from the oil fields in the east of the country and reaches the port of Yanbu on the Red Sea, on the other side of the peninsula, completely out of reach of the Strait of Hormuz. This pipeline didn't come out of nowhere. It was built during the wars of the 1980s when Iran was already threatening to close the strait for the first time. For decades, it remained in the background. Today, it is operating at its maximum capacity, 7 million barrels per day. And here's a detail that almost no channel will tell you. This pipeline had never operated at full capacity in 45 years of existence. Never. The first time in history happened on March 11th, 2026, weeks after the start of this war. The United Arab Emirates has its own path. A 360-kilometer pipeline that starts from the inland oil fields and goes straight to the port of Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman, also at full capacity. And the port of Khor Fakkan, which opens directly to the ocean without passing through the strait, is already receiving ships and exporting oil to the world without asking anyone's permission. In other words, when Iran closed the strait thinking it had the world in its hands, it didn't count on one thing. The Gulf countries had already built, decades earlier, the first pieces of an escape route. But these existing routes are not enough. There's still a long way to go. And that's where something comes in that's happening right now, at this moment, at a speed the world has rarely seen in infrastructure construction. New pipelines are being negotiated between Kuwait and the Emirates, between Iraq and the Emirates, between Qatar and the Emirates. Each new connection is simple to understand. One more country that Iran can no longer hold hostage. Each barrel that finds an alternative route is a barrel that will never again need to pay Iran's toll. There's a proposal that could be a game changer. No mountains, no $300 billion, and no waiting for a generation. A 116-kilometer corridor connecting Sharjah on the Persian Gulf to Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman, crossing the lowest point of the Hajar Mountains. No giant locks, no depth required for large oil tankers. A corridor of pipelines and roads that would turn Fujairah into the world's largest energy export hub. Its estimated cost, $4 billion. Now, if you compare that to the Grand Canal's $300 billion, it's almost irrelevant. And if we compare it to the cost of the crisis that is already destroying entire economies, well, it's urgent. But I need to tell you something few people mention. Something that will affect you and has nothing to do with the price of gas. Think about the bread you buy, the rice, the corn, any food that comes from a farm. To produce all of that, farmers need fertilizer. Fertilizer is what feeds the soil and makes plants grow faster and stronger. Without fertilizer, the harvest drops. With a smaller harvest, food prices go up. The problem then reaches everyone. Not just people living near the Middle East. 1/3 of all fertilizer transported by sea in the world passes through the Strait of Hormuz. The Persian Gulf produces between 1/3 and almost half of the world's urea. Urea is the most widely used type of fertilizer on the planet, made from natural gas. And without it, crops simply don't grow the way they need to. The price of urea has already jumped from less than $500 to more than $700 per ton since the beginning of the crisis. And the timing couldn't be worse. It's exactly planting season in the Northern Hemisphere right now. Farmers need to buy fertilizer in the next few months to ensure the harvest at the end of the year. If they can't, food prices in 2026 and 2027 will rise in a way that will affect everyone. The UN has already warned about this. Countries from all continents depend on these exports. India, which is the world's largest rice exporter, is cutting fertilizer production because natural gas has become too expensive. Brazil, the largest soybean producer on the planet, imports almost all the fertilizer it uses. Entire nations in Africa and South Asia that barely have reserves are among the most vulnerable, and there are no stored reserves of fertilizers in the world like there are for oil. When it's gone, it's gone. There is a window of at most 3 months before this starts to translate into real drops in food production. And the clock is ticking. On the other side of the planet, Asia is responding to this crisis in a way that no one expected. In the short term, it's going back in time. Japan, South Korea, and Thailand are restarting coal plants that had been shut down. It's dirty, costly, and harms the climate. But it's what they have right now. As you can see, this crisis is speeding up a change that years of efforts to protect the environment couldn't accelerate. Vietnam has made a deal with Russia to build its first nuclear power plant. Malaysia is considering the same. China has dozens of reactors under construction. And electric car sales, which were already growing, are expected to skyrocket even more with oil at this price. The most ironic thing about all this is this. By using its ultimate weapon, Iran is pushing the world exactly in the direction that most harms its own power in the long run. Because a world that depends less on oil is a world that cares less and less about who controls the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's greatest defeat may not come from a bombing. It may not come from a military operation, a naval blockade, or a UN resolution. It could come from an excavator, from a pipeline buried in the desert, from a port built far away from Iran. And maybe the most important lesson from this crisis isn't about Iran. It's about us. About the danger of letting the fate of billions of people depend on 21 miles of water. The world learned this lesson in the most expensive way possible, and now it's rushing to make sure it never has to learn it again. Salmi is still there, in the waters of Dubai, with 2 million barrels of oil on board that can't get out. That image, a fully loaded ship, stopped, unable to move, is the perfect summary of what's happening in the world right now. And maybe it's also the summary of what's about to change. Some wars are won with bombs. This one, well, maybe it'll be won with oil pipelines. Now I want to know your opinion. Do you think these alternative routes will be enough to take away Iran's power over the strait? Leave your opinion in the comments. If you learned something new from this video, share it with someone who should know too. Subscribe to the channel to catch upcoming content. See you next time.